I've told you why Albertans are mad. They were morally abused by all the parties. They were the punching bag of all the parties. That doesn't feel good. They ship $14 billion a year more to Ottawa than they get back from Ottawa, equalization. Most of that goes to Quebec, which hates them the most. That's oil money, of course. So the rank hypocrisy of Quebec saying no pipelines, but they'll take their Saudi oil tankers and their American oil by rail. That irritates. But I think it's mainly worry that they'll be turned into the Detroit of Canada, this once mighty industrial base. Earlier this year, for the first time in a decade, Alberta oil production declined. How is that even possible? America has added 50% to their production in the last 5 years. How is Canada's declining? We have 200 billion barrels of oil under the ground. How can our production be declining? Well, because of Trudeau and Rachel Notley. Notley's gone, but Trudeau and Quebec and BC are still corking it in. So that's the Alberta case. Albertans just don't want to be poor and unemployed. You can't blame them. Whether that's an independent country and still part of the British Commonwealth, or if it joins the United States, either as a state or an independent territory like Guam or American Samoa, or maybe if it joins as a full-blown state, the Democrats would probably want Puerto Rico to balance off the Democrat state, the Republican state, whatever. That's the Alberta side of things. But what about the Liberal side of things, the Toronto side of things? The clips we showed you from David Menzies' Vox Pop didn't quite do the job, but let me put it to you this way. Let's say you're Justin Trudeau. What did he win? 156 seats? Was that how it all ended on Monday night? So you have 338 seats in Parliament, and he won 156. That's a minority. But you take out Alberta's 34 seats. Liberals didn't. You're not taking a single Liberal seat away, but you're taking away 33 Tories and a New Democrat. So you shrink Parliament from 338 seats down to 304 seats. Guess what? Justin Trudeau just won a majority government. And if Saskatchewan leaves too, well, that's even more. I mean, you will have Liberal governments for the end of time. It would be like if you took Texas out of the United States. The Democrats would win every single election forever. So, is it in Justin Trudeau's interest to see Alberta leave? Well, in terms of winning the next election, it most certainly is. How about a question that Menzies put to some of the streeters there? What about the carbon dioxide emissions? Canada emits just under 750 megatons of CO2 a year. It's what? Not even 2% of the world's man-made emissions. It's nothing. It's a rounding error. China adds that much more every few months. Canada's irrelevant. But Justin Trudeau, Catherine McKenna, Gerald Butts, they're obsessed with meeting our UN climate targets. By the way, you can't do that if you're bringing in 350,000 new migrants a year, each of whom wants a house and a car. You'll never do it. Unless you get rid of Alberta. Because of those 750 megatons a year of CO2, about a third are from Alberta. The oil sands emits carbon dioxide. It's an energy-intensive business. So you would immediately be the hero of the global warming jet set. Now, of course, it's a ridiculous accounting trick. The oil sands would still be operating. In fact, they would be operating more than ever because they wouldn't have Ottawa meddling. But you could say, no, that's not ours. Just like when we buy stuff from China and we're basically outsourcing the carbon dioxide to China, we can pretend it's not ours. That's exactly the kind of Enron accounting that global warming politics are based on. So if you say goodbye to Alberta, I'm speaking from the point of view of a Toronto Liberal, Ottawa Liberal, Montreal Liberal, you say goodbye to 33 or 34 Conservative MPs, And those ridings are always going to go conservative, plus or minus a few. So it's like the Democrats saying goodbye to Texas, or goodbye to Utah, or goodbye to West Virginia. They're happy to get rid of those votes. From a global warming point of view, ta-da, we did it. And where do all the conservative ideas in Canada come from? A lot of them come from Alberta. It was Ralph Klein who was the template for Mike Harris. It was. Who are amongst the loudest advocates against gun control. Albertans and Saskatchewan people too. Where are the conservative ideas? Well, where did Stephen Harper come from? Alberta. Where did Stockwell Day come from? Alberta. He then moved to BC, but he was an Alberta boy for first 50 years of his life. All of a sudden, there's just no more. Where were the noisiest opponents to forced bilingualism? Alberta. Where were the noisiest opponents to the wheat board? Alberta. So if you are a liberal, and liberals care about power, government power, why wouldn't you want to say goodbye to Alberta? Oh, I know the answer. It's obvious. It's what I said at the very beginning. It's the $14 billion a year in equalization payments and other payments that Ottawa gets more than it gives to Alberta. But that's a rounding error in the whole scheme of things. I mean, what's the Canadian GDP? Without Googling it, I don't want to guess wrong. I think the Canadian GDP is $2 trillion. Am I right on that, Justin? Can you Google that for me? I think Canada's GDP is around $2 trillion. That's 2,000 billion, right? So if you're giving up 15 billion in equalization, that's not even 1%. Like, it really is a rounding error. What do you? Yeah, thank you. That's U.S. dollars. So yeah, you put that in Canadian, that's $2 trillion. Thanks for Googling that. Yeah, so 1.65 trillion U.S. dollars. Let's call that 2.2. I forget the math. That's 2 trillion Canadian. Thanks. So yeah. Oh, but we're going to give up all this oil money in Ottawa. Yeah, it's a rounding error, 1%. And you really think Trudeau cares about money? I mean, he racks up deficits. In a tweet, he dropped $50 million to Trevor Noah of The Late Show or whatever. He goes to Africa and he hands out billions like he's some black-faced Santa Claus or something. So, yeah, I mean, the reason Albertans would want to go, besides the respect, is so they're not all put on unemployment and being shut down. So those are financial reasons in addition to moral reasons and sovereignty reasons and self-respect reasons and all the soft reasons. But the hard reason is they don't want to be out of a job. Those would be a reason why a normal, rational prime minister would want to keep Alberta in. I mean, for God's sakes, they've got 200 billion barrels of proven reserves. But believe Trudeau and believe Gerald Butts when they say they want to phase out the oil sands. I say again, when Pierre Trudeau came for the oil money, like all good communists, and Pierre Trudeau was, at least early in his career, a Marxist by his own confession. Communists, if you look at their iconography, if you look at their propaganda photos, posters, there's always a factory, and in fact it's belching smoke. That's the proof it's working. I mean, look at the symbol of communism. It's the hammer and the sickle, tools of work, of heavy industry, not of,
Okay, so Ezra's going on a little bit of a rant there, and I thought I'd cut him off and try to stay on topic. The topic of this video is the case for Wexit, Western separatism. And I thought I'd open with Ezra Levant's video because he makes a valid point in my estimation, which was the phasing out of the oil sands could be a pretense to phase out Alberta or force us out of Confederation. The more that I think about it, the more it makes sense to me. And and I believe it's hatred that's driving it, essentially. Jealousy for the success in the West. So that's my main point, is that Ezra actually might be onto something here when he talks about the motivations behind all the nonsense that's going through. He said Pierre Elliott Trudeau's dad, his idea was to take money from the West by forming the National Energy Board and then bring that money to Quebec. Essentially, we'll support Quebec no matter what. But Trudeau hates the oil sands and he wants to phase it out completely. And there's a clip earlier that showed him, saying, Alberta belongs to Quebec. All of Canada belongs to Quebec. So it's a very divisive message, but undoubtedly he couldn't have changed so much that he completely reversed his view. I highly doubt it. But that aside, what I want to ask my viewers is this question. If we implement Western separatism, if we succeed in separating, then what? Will we be landlocked? Will we succeed to become a state, the 51st state of the United States, or a territory of the states? Whom will join us? Most likely Saskatchewan. There's a lot of issues like even pensions, that are owed by the federal government that will have to be accounted for. My thinking was that if Alberta left and took its resource money and taxes with them, there would be a very crippling dent in the Canadian economy. I could be wrong about that, but nevertheless, that's what I think. But there are a lot of questions that I'm thinking about separatism, and it's becoming a more and more legitimate movement here in Alberta. The question is what will happen once we implement it, and of course, how will we implement it? So Kenny's kind of playing a slow card here. He's trying his best to be patient in the situation at hand and doing his best to give Prime Minister Trudeau all the opportunities available to try to address the problems in Alberta and Saskatchewan and, everywhere else. Address the problems such as carbon tax and equalization before it becomes a issue of challenging the Constitution, let's say, which of course is secret talk for we'll separate if you don't give in to our demands. I think, but I'm not sure. I'm unsure about the position, the true stance that Kenny takes in government. I think he's a nationalist because he seems to want to keep Canada intact, at least on the surface. So we'll go with that. But Wexit is becoming very popular in Western Canada. And the reason is Trudeau has hammered us to a pulp. We, as people, a lot of people whom are unemployed here and who struggle just to survive, we really cannot take another 4 years of Trudeau. And I mean, they really can't, unless they move away from Canada somehow and seek solace somewhere else in a life that's more affordable somewhere else. Maybe even the United States. I don't know. What I do know is that there is a tremendous amount of people out of work. And the bills keep racking up and racking up and racking up. Like the carbon tax will just kill us. And so when you can speculate as to the motivations that Trudeau has, and if you come at Ezra's perspective, it's really interesting. He's always there's always been a jealousy about Alberta in the East. Undoubtedly, there are people that support us in the East, in Ontario and Quebec and maybe other provinces. I can never be sure. I'll not be so naive to say that everyone is against us. But as it stands, Trudeau is definitely looks like trying to alienate us. But he still wants our money. So all I'm saying is that Wexit could be something very interesting for Alberta if it came to that point, the end of Canada as we know it. Because what I do know, if implemented, Wexit actually allows, if implemented, Wexit will bring into question for other provinces the idea of confederation. So other provinces or territories may consider the idea of separation according to the law. That's what I heard from Daniel Smith anyway, is that if Alberta separates, then other provinces may challenge as well. So it's an interesting and very unique situation in our history. I don't know if our political leaders, Scott Moe and Jason Kenney, are willing to take it that far. It will depend on the decisions made in this government and how fairly they treat Alberta in regards to the big issues like the carbon tax. And if leeway is not gained, then I think that that argument will become more and more powerful. So it'll be interesting to think in the future Trudeau will be known as the Prime Minister that broke up Canada. If you examine it, I wonder if we'll come to that point. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.